What's good, Orange Nation? This is Neil Adler with another episode of Syracuse Central on the Fan Arch Network. It's Friday. Happy Friday. How's everybody doing? Everybody have a good week? Hopefully you did. I'm down in Nashville, Tennessee, hanging out with my son this weekend. But before we get to that, we're going to talk a little Syracuse football. And of course, he's talking a little bit of smack to me this week because his Tennessee Volunteers beat Syracuse, my alma mater, last week. Okay, it's over. Let's focus on Saturday. Okay, so what do you think? Is Syracuse football going to cover the spread against UConn on Saturday, noontime? Spread, I think, is 6.5 right now. I think Syracuse is going to win this game. I think UConn is a good team. I don't think Syracuse is going to blow them out, but I think Syracuse, after ultimately getting pounded a bit against Tennessee, although they could have made it a one-score game in the fourth quarter, didn't happen. They lost by 19, and certainly Tennessee is a better team than UConn. I think Syracuse is going to have a big advantage. Their offensive line against a smaller UConn defensive unit. Tennessee had a stout defense, edge rushers. And then also Tennessee's offensive line certainly had its way with Syracuse's defensive line. I think UConn will try and run the ball a bit and extend drives and have longer drives and keep the Syracuse offense off the field. But I don't think UConn will necessarily rush for 247 yards like Tennessee did. So we'll see. I think it's going to be close, especially in the first half. Syracuse is going to be fired up. It's their home opener. I think ultimately Syracuse will cover, and it's going to be 34-21. I feel like the spread was like almost 60, maybe like 59, 58 and a half. The last time I looked. Are they going to cover that? I don't know. I mean, both have good offenses. UConn put up a ton of points last week, although it was against an in-state, not super great team. I think the Syracuse defense will be better. Hopefully they'll do better tackling in the open field. The Syracuse offense, in terms of communicating well, making sure that they're not burning timeouts to avoid delay of game penalties, things like that. I think Yassine Willis will have another good game. And Jelly, I think, will be fine. I think they win this game, but UConn is a good team. They certainly could go bowling again this year. They won 9 games last year. I think they were 9-4. So we'll see. We'll see how it all pans out, but I like Syracuse to cover and win 34-21. But let me know what you think. Drop some comments for me on that. Okay, so Fran Brown on his it wasn't his weekly radio show, but he was on, I think it was ESPN Radio. It was a radio interview on Thursday. And he talked about, he didn't give a lot of specifics. He said that Devin Grant is 50-50 and that some other guys are questionable, but he didn't provide names there. In terms of Grant, I didn't think he had a great game against Tennessee, frankly. I think Duchesne had a good game if we're talking about safeties, but I don't think Grant was overly impressive. But he's still a veteran leader of this team, and so if he's not in, obviously other guys are going to have to step up at the safety spots. So we'll see about that. We want him to be able to play. In terms of other guys, again, Brown didn't name them specifically. He just said there are other guys that are questionable. Jonte Cook didn't finish the entire game. Barry Buxton, Chris Thomas, a couple of guys didn't play. I believe Emmanuel Ross was one of them. I think Jaleel Martin, who's a defensive back, didn't play as well. Cook said earlier this week that he had some leg muscle tighten up, but that he expected to play on Saturday against UConn. It's tough. It's football. I mean, there's injuries in all sports, but football especially. There's going to be injuries, and we want Syracuse to be as healthy as a collective unit as possible. But from week to week, stuff's going to happen, and so we certainly want Jonte Cook. I mean, he was looking pretty solid. He was looking like their best receiver in week 1, and then he didn't play the entire game, but he had a touchdown catch. Steve Angeli's only touchdown throw. Buxton in the secondary is important. He's an important guy. So we'll keep an eye on that. This will be my last show of the week before Monday, and obviously we can talk about we will talk about the game, and we can mention injury if there are significant injuries. But certainly, I'd say if most top of mind to me would be Devin Grant for sure, and then Buxton in the secondary, and then Jonte Cook. And now, to be fair, Syracuse has other more than capable receivers. Tyshawn Russell and Daryl Gill and Amari Hatcher, Jalen Hornsby, other guys as well, and obviously Emmanuel Ross didn't play, but yeah, I mean that would be a bummer if Cook didn't play. He's really good, and then obviously totally forgot Justice Ross Simmons, who I believe is one of the starters. So the starters were Ross Simmons, Cook, and Daryl Gill, if I'm not mistaken, or at least on the depth chart. So we'll see about Cook. If Cook doesn't play, does that mean Syracuse isn't going to win? I wouldn't say that about anyone. Even Steve Angeli. That's the good thing about this year with the quarterback position, and we hope that Steve Angeli plays well and doesn't ever get injured. But we've got Ricky Collins. But I'm definitely keeping my eye on Buxton and Cook in the second. Buxton and Grant in the secondary, and then Cook from the receiver spot. All right, so I just want to bring this up briefly. In his interview with ESPN Radio Syracuse, I think it was on Orange Nation with Stephen Pauly, there's a quote from Fran that I saw. I didn't get to listen to the whole interview. I was traveling today, or I was traveling on Thursday, excuse me. But I saw a quote online that I thought was interesting from Fran. He said, "I love the fans, but we need to make the fans want to come after last." Well, he didn't say after last week, but after last week. And then who am I? The quote was, "Who am I to tell them, hey, you better show up?" So it's like I love this man because he's always so real and he's no nonsense, but he also has a big heart and he's a man of faith and. He calls it like he sees it, and he doesn't back down from anywhere. He's just got like high character and just great personality traits. But it's like admirable, but it's like coach. It was okay. So the team didn't play well last week, and they lost to a team that is ranked inside the top 20 now, at least in one of the polls, and if they keep winning, could be in the playoff again. So. And they lost by 19. It could have been closer, whatever. It's like admirable that he says that, but I don't think he needs to say it. I mean, like he's reading the room, like he's just very self-aware. I don't know. It's just like I saw that and I was like, oh my God, coach, we got you, man. Like, okay. So you lost the game. Whoop-de-doo. You lost to a really good team at a neutral site that was really more of a home game for the opposing team. You got a new quarterback. You got new guys or guys in bigger roles on both sides of the field, and in special teams. Tennessee just had a monster advantage in the trenches at both lines, and they ran the ball down Syracuse's throat, and then you had 2 turnovers and some other penalty, and that's it. So I respect Fran for saying that, but. I think after last season going 10-3, being ranked in the final AP poll at number 20, beating 3 ranked teams. Yeah, they had their Stanford loss in particular was really bad, but they were only projected to be number 12 in the ACC, and they finished tied for 4th. Projected to be 12 this year. We'll see where they end up. They could be between 4 and 12 based on the schedule, but I would say that even after last week's loss and some idiots that say things on social media like, oh, fire Fran Brown. I mean, granted, the defense has to get better, and some fans are definitely frustrated with Elijah Robinson, so they need to keep doing better on defense. But I think we got Fran's back. Who's to say what the rest of the season holds? Hopefully they'll be 1-1 after this week. But I love Fran's accountability and self-awareness, but. We got you, Fran. We got you. All right, last story here. I wanted to talk a little bit about this. We talked about earlier in the week about like Syracuse playing Penn State and a home and home, and then they're going to play another Big Ten team and a home coming up over the next few years. And Wild Hack is he gave a press conference earlier this week, and he's also done some other interviews, and so there's some interesting nuggets. And one of them I wanted to share here was he talks about how they will likely play um, 2 weekday games. Um, and when we say weekday, I mean it's most likely going to be like a Friday night game. Like for instance, this year Syracuse plays North Carolina on Halloween, which is a Friday night at the Dome, and then they also, I believe, later this month they play Colgate on a Friday night. And he said he did acknowledge that more than 2 weekday games would be tough, just because there's ultimately Saturday is more of the traditional window for big time matchups, but it's interesting. There's so much stuff coming into play with revenue sharing and schools sharing up to $20.5 million this year in direct payments to their athletes, and that's going to keep growing. And Wild Hack said they were going to, spend that cap this year, and they want to keep doing that. But let's be honest, Syracuse, in terms of bringing in revenue on their own from like ticket sales and even maybe merchandise, but like ticket sales, they're at a disadvantage. The JMA Wireless Dome doesn't have nearly as many seats as other big time schools with stadiums of 100,000 plus people. So, they have to try and make it up elsewhere because they want their athletic department to be solvent, so to speak, and they want to be able to continue to, revenue share with predominantly football and then men's and women's basketball and hopefully a little bit to other sports, but they want to keep being able to fund Olympic sports, non-revenue sports. So the thinking here is with the Friday night game or just a weekday game is that the ACC, they have a new revenue sharing model where they look at like the most television viewers for, I believe it's just football, men's basketball, and then that like determines like who gets larger share of the league's annual revenue distribution. So, maybe it makes sense for a Syracuse to play a North Carolina on a Friday night, a standalone game, so to speak, or not much else competition, at least in terms of ACC games, versus having it on a Saturday when most of the teams are playing. And then you're also, obviously, there's other games that people are watching too in other leagues that could influence your games. So from the standpoint, like for instance, Syracuse played Tennessee last week at the same time as Ohio State, Texas. So, I mean, did that game maybe some casual fans that might have tuned into Syracuse, Tennessee, probably maybe tuned into Ohio State, Texas instead because it's just a more marquee game. It was 1 versus 3. So anyway, just kind of wrap this up. But Syracuse, again, given it's a smaller school, than some of these other ACC schools, in terms of the attendance at games and just a smaller school. And I'm not saying I don't know how many boosters Syracuse has versus other schools, but the bottom line is Syracuse, if they want to continue to share the maximum amount allowed in revenue sharing, which is important for recruiting standpoint, they got to get creative, and they want to make sure they have enough funds to do that, as well as support these Olympic sports. And so looking at the ACC payouts, a Friday night game or two, or just a weekday game, maybe it could be a Thursday. Maybe it's something, that it's a smart move. I don't know. I don't know if if they had their, a game on a Saturday, would they get like a higher attendance, like in person, but like less attendance, less eyeballs on the, in terms of television viewership versus Friday. I don't know the numbers specifically, but it seems to me like, Wild Hack and his team, they got to get creative about what they're trying to do in terms of bringing in revenue and staying competitive. There's just so much more to think about now with revenue sharing, and obviously there's NIL and there's conference realignment and the portal and high school recruit. I mean, there's just so much going on, but it's it's tricky. But I mean, Wild Hack said in part, listen, during the week there's limited competition. You have a chance to get a larger, a bigger audience, and it's something that they're kind of like thinking about in terms of like future scheduling, in terms of weekday versus Saturday games, and I think that's a wise move. Um, I did agree. I do agree with him that trying to do more than two would be tough. Again, just based on travel logistics and I'm sure other factors. And then the other thing we have to keep in mind is, the other Power Four leagues, with the SEC announcing not too long ago, I believe all three of them will be moving forward having 9 conference games, and the ACC has 8. And it wouldn't surprise me one bit if the ACC goes 9, although I'm sure that there's logistics that go into that, and there could be challenges, especially with two ACC teams in California and one in Texas, and it's the Atlantic Coast Conference and it's the All Coast Conference, if you ask me. But I have to imagine that they're going to they're going to have to go to 9. And I think with Syracuse, it's like, on the one hand, you want to, in terms of non-conference games, whether you have 3 or 4, you want to make sure you have a couple that you think you can win, just to boost your win total. But it's also important for your resume to play tough teams, especially with the College Football Playoff Selection Committee looking at, or considering not just like strength of record and all that, and strength of schedule, and teams not getting dinged as much when they lose to high quality teams, or if they lose to a bad team getting dinged more, or if you beat a cupcake you don't get as much props for that, so to speak. So there's a balancing act there, and it's the same thing with basketball, in the non-conference. But I think Fran has made it clear that they want to play tough competition, and to be the best you have to beat the best. So this year, look at this year, it's Tennessee, and then at Notre Dame, and then Colgate and UConn. And I don't think Syracuse will have a problem with Colgate, but UConn's a pretty good team. So that's like 3 or 4 that are they're not bad. So schedule this year is tough. But it wouldn't surprise me, and I'll just close with this. It wouldn't surprise me if the ACC goes to 9 conference games. But let me know what you think. Do you think that that the ACC should go to 9? What do you think? Is it better or worse for Syracuse in terms of trying to get to a bowl or the CFP? Do you like the Friday night games? Do you not like the Friday night games? Obviously, you might have a different opinion about it if you're going to the game in person versus watching it on your television. But let me know. Drop me some comments about both of those topics. And okay, so it's Friday, and tomorrow's Saturday. Syracuse is going to get a win. I'll obviously have more coverage next week on football. Start getting more into basketball and recruiting in both sports. And I hope you have a great weekend. Enjoy the game tomorrow. This is Neil Adler with Syracuse Central on the Fan Arch Network. Thanks so much for tuning in. Really appreciate your support. Take care, friends.